Okay, welcome to Jay's Retro Toys and Games for Thursday, December 4th, 2025. Episode 85 is ready to go, where today's journey takes us back to the golden age of 16-bit gaming, a time when colorful sprites, unforgettable soundtracks, and fierce console wars defined a generation. This is the story of the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, the SNES, the SNES, one of the most beloved consoles in gaming history. The SNES wasn't just a machine. It was a cultural phenomenon that shaped how people played, imagined, and connected. From its humble beginnings in Japan to its global domination, the SNES became a symbol of creativity, innovation, and fun. Over the next 20 minutes, the story unfolds from the roots of Nintendo's success to the legacy that continues to inspire gamers today on Jay's Retro Toys and Games. And welcome to episode 85 of Jay's Retro Toys and Games. I'm your host, Jason DeCanio, ready to go on this December 4th, 2025, with a look at the Super Nintendo system. But to understand the Super Nintendo, it's essential to go back to where it all began, the 8-bit era. In the early 1980s, the video game industry was in crisis. Oversaturation, poor quality games, and consumer fatigue led to the infamous crash of 1983. Many believed video games were just a passing fad, but in 1985, Nintendo changed everything with the release of the NES. The NES wasn't just a console, it was a revolution. It introduced a new level of quality control, iconic characters, and unforgettable experiences. Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, and Metroid became household names. Nintendo's strict licensing policies ensured that only polished, well-crafted games reached players. The NES revived the industry and established Nintendo as the undisputed leader in home gaming. But as the decade came to a close, technology was evolving. Sega, a fierce competitor, had already launched its 16-bit Genesis console in Japan in 1988 and in North America in 1989. The Genesis offered faster processing, sharper graphics, and a sleek, modern design. Nintendo knew it couldn't rely on the NES forever. The company needed something new, something powerful enough to compete, yet familiar enough to retain its loyal fan base. In 1990, after years of development, Nintendo unveiled the Super Famicom in Japan. It was sleek, futuristic, and packed with advanced technology. The console sold out almost immediately, with thousands of eager fans lining up overnight. A year later, in August of 1991, the system arrived in North America as the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, the SNES. The 16-bit era had officially begun. The SNES loss was more than a product release. It was an event. Nintendo's marketing campaign emphasized the console's superior graphics, sound, and gameplay. The system came bundled with Super Mario World, a game that perfectly showcased the NES's capabilities, or the SNES's. Super Mario World wasn't just another Mario game. It introduced Yoshi, a lovable dinosaur companion, and expanded the Mushroom Kingdom into a vast, interconnected world filled with secrets, alternate paths, and hidden exits. The game's colorful visuals, smooth animations, and catchy soundtrack demonstrated the SNES's power. It was a statement. Nintendo was still the king of fun. The SNES hardware was a marvel for its time. Its 16-bit Rico 5A22 processor, allowed for more complex graphics and smoother gameplay. The system could display up to 32,768 colors and featured advanced sound capabilities thanks to the Sony SP700 audio chip, or the SPC700 audio chip. I want to make sure I get that right. This partnership with Sony would later have major consequences for the gaming industry, but at the time, it gave the Super Nintendo a distinct advantage in sound design. Early titles like F-Zero and Pilot Wings showcased the console's Mode 7 graphics, a special feature that allowed for rotating and scaling backwards, creating a pseudo 3D effect. These games felt futuristic, offering a glimpse into what gaming could become. And by the end of 1991, the Super Nintendo had sold millions of units, and Nintendo had once again captured the hearts of gamers worldwide. But the competition was heating up, and the next few years would see one of the most intense rivalries in entertainment history. The early 90s were defined by one of the greatest rivalries in pop culture, Nintendo versus Sega. The console wars weren't just about hardware, they were about identity. Sega positioned itself as the cool, edgy alternative to Nintendo's family-friendly image. Its slogan, "Genesis does what Nintendo don't," became a rallying cry for a new generation of gamers. Sega's mascot, Sonic the Hedgehog, was fast, rebellious, and full of attitude. Everything Mario wasn't. The Genesis emphasized speed and style, while Nintendo focused on polish and creativity. The battle played out in commercials, magazines, and schoolyards across the world. Nintendo responded with confidence. The company knew that its strength lay in its games. Titles like Super Mario Kart, The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, and Super Metroid demonstrated the Super Nintendo's technical superiority and artistic depth. Each release was a masterpiece, carefully crafted to push the boundaries of what was possible. The rivalry fueled innovation, and Sega introduced new peripherals and aggressive marketing tactics, while Nintendo doubled down on quality and storytelling. The result was a golden age of gaming where both companies pushed each other to create unforgettable experiences. And by the mid-90s, the Super Nintendo had overtaken the Genesis in global sales, cementing Nintendo's dominance once again. But the war had changed the industry forever, proving that competition could drive creativity and progress. The true legacy of the Super Nintendo lies in its games. Its library is a treasure trove of creativity, innovation, and artistry. Each title pushed the boundaries of storytelling, gameplay, and design. The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, redefined the adventure genre with its sprawling world, intricate puzzles, and dual-realm mechanic. It set the standard for every Zelda game that followed. Super Metroid perfected the art of atmospheric storytelling, using music, lighting, and exploration to create a sense of isolation and discovery. Then came Donkey Kong Country, a game that stunned players with its pre-rendered 3D graphics. Developed by Rare, it proved that the Super Nintendo still had plenty of power left, even as newer consoles loomed on the horizon. Its fluid animations and catchy soundtrack made it an instant classic. The Super Nintendo also became the home of some of the greatest role-playing games ever made. Final Fantasy VI, Secret of Mana, and Chrono Trigger developed or delivered emotional, cinematic experiences that rivaled movies in scope and depth. These games introduced players to complex characters, branching narratives, and unforgettable music. Each title contributed to the Super Nintendo's reputation as a console for dreamers, a platform where imagination had no limits. Nintendo has always been known for innovation, and the Super Nintendo was no exception. Beyond its impressive hardware, the console introduced a range of accessories and features that expanded what players could do. The Super Scope, a shoulder-mounted light gun, brought arcade-style shooting into the living room. The Super Game Boy allowed players to insert Game Boy cartridges and play them on the big screen, complete with custom borders and color palettes. The Super Nintendo also featured enhancement chips built directly into game cartridges. Titles like Star Fox used the Super FX chip to render 3D polygons, a groundbreaking achievement for the time. These innovations kept the Super Nintendo relevant even as technology advanced. Nintendo's willingness to experiment ensured that the Super Nintendo remained fresh and exciting throughout its lifespan. It wasn't just a console, it was a platform for creativity. By the mid-90s, the gaming world was changing rapidly. 3D graphics were becoming the new frontier, and companies like Sony and Sega were preparing to launch next-generation consoles. Nintendo began developing its own 3D system, the Nintendo 64, signaling the end of the 16-bit era. But the Super Nintendo didn't fade quietly. Some of its greatest titles were released near the end of its life, including Super Mario RPG, Kirby's Dream Land 3, and Donkey Kong Country 3. These games demonstrated just how far developers had come in mastering the hardware. And when the Nintendo 64 launched in 1996, the Super Nintendo gracefully stepped aside, leaving behind a legacy of over 700 games and countless memories. It had defined an era and set the stage for the future of gaming. Decades later, the Super Nintendo continues to inspire. Its games are studied by developers, cherished by collectors, and replayed by fans around the world. The Super Nintendo Classic Edition, released in 2017, introduced a new generation to timeless masterpieces like Super Mario World and The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. The Super Nintendo's influence can be seen everywhere, in modern indie games that emulate its pixel art style, in orchestral concerts celebrating its music, and in the nostalgia that fuels retro gaming culture. The Super Nintendo wasn't just a console. It was a cultural milestone, and it represented a time when creativity, imagination, and fun were at the heart of gaming. Its legacy lives on in every controller click, every chip-tuned melody, and every player who remembers the magic of turning on that gray and purple box for the first time. From Super Mario World to Chrono Trigger, from the console wars to the dawn of 3D, the Super Nintendo defined an era of creativity and fun that will never be forgotten. Thanks for watching Jay's Retro Toys and Games. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep those controllers ready, because the next adventure is just a power-up away. We'll see you next time for episode 86 of the Console Wars on Jay's Retro Toys and Games. Have a great weekend. Bye for now.